First of all, I will present the context and the issues. Okay. I carry out personal and collective research with my colleagues to analyze the relationships between city dwellers and the climate. And to study those, this research is based on empirical entry. We do some field surveys to observe populations in real situations in their everyday lives. We mobilize social sciences techniques to explore those inhabitants' real experiences and the way in which they are confronted to various meteorological and climatic phenomena such as the urban heat island, urban microclimates, or extreme events such as heat waves, drought, storms, heavy rains. In particular, we studied the differences in individuals' and social groups' vulnerabilities through 3 dimensions. In terms of exposure, facts of being subject to climatic hazards, but also sensitivities, feeling of phenomena, and adaptation capacities. We therefore relied on a now classic definition of social vulnerability based on those 3 dimensions. Then we've studied the inhabitants' adaptation strategies to try to maintain their comfort and their health. This had led us to also analyze the differences in resilience, but also the limits of resilience according to the individuals and social groups considered. From the point of view of scientific positioning, the main entry is a social sciences one with an opening on interdisciplinarity. We have summarized here the main scientific technique that we use: in situ observations, field notebooks, questionnaires, interview populations. And this social science research is conducted in interaction with the one of the researchers of our team who work on physical phenomena with measurements, simulation, and modeling. I have now finished with the main contextual elements. Let's now move on the second time of my presentation that will be focused on the analysis model and the method used to build it. So, first of all, what do we mean by an analytical model of climate vulnerabilities of city dwellers? Well, the meaning is a little different from the definition of model among researchers working on physical phenomena. Indeed, the model here is an analytical matrix of characteristics and structure of climate city dwellers relations. So as you can see in the center of the slide, it includes 4 sections: vulnerabilities, factors and profiles, impact on physical and mental health, adaptive strategies, and refuge spaces for population during extreme events. In the left columns, we summarize the main input data that have served as the basis for the model construction. Have been included the result of all surveys we carried out during 7 years in 2 cities in France, Lyon and Nantes, with various techniques: quantitative, qualitative, participatory science, interdisciplinary survey with measurements of physical phenomena and population questionnaires. And in total, to give an idea, it represents more than 2,000 inhabitants that were questioned directly and deeply, and a much larger populations during broader observations in the 2 cities. And the right columns summarize the main fields in which the model can be used. We'll see it later if we have time. So, what processing steps allow the passage from the left column, input data, to model building? Let's see. Once we had the result of the various survey, we carry out several analyses. First, we have created databases on the 4 components summarized here at the top right. Then we produced map to explore the spatial dimension of the inhabitants' climatic experiences and the differences in exposure according to their space practices. Then we've done a work of typologies. And finally, we've done a synthetic representation to obtain summary diagrams. Here is an overview of synthetic diagrams. For the vulnerabilities, here, the synthesis highlights the main factors that make an individual more or less vulnerable and classify it. Concerning here, in the back, the impacts on physical and mental health, the synthesis integrates and classifies all of them and also proposes possible evolution scenarios. You have a poster here in Ikuk on this synthesis. For the adaptive strategy, the representation establish their panorama, a classification, and an analysis of their characteristics. There is also a poster here in Ikuk on this dimension. Finally, regarding the refuge spaces in which the inhabitants go to seek their thermal comfort during extreme events, the synthesis specializes and classifies all the one observed. I suggest that we now focus on the first synthesis that concerns the vulnerabilities, and that will be the last part of my presentation. You see, I try to do quickly so we can go to have lunch. Our field survey highlights many different factors explaining the inequalities in vulnerability and resilience for a same extreme events, such as a heat wave. We have classified them into different categories. First category, classic social individual characteristics, for example, gender, age, position in the life cycle, socio-economic activities, state of mental and physical health, etc. The second category, lifestyle, for example, type and composition of household, type and characteristic of housing, consumption pattern, etc. There's a lot of, as you can see. Third category, social networks, family, friend, neighbor, all the networks that will confer different resources for individuals to adapt. 5, the spaces in which the spaces lived by inhabitants, which they practices for their different activity, and which will expose them to different microclimates. And 5, their type of mobility, mode, frequency, and duration that expose them to different microclimates. All these factors interact together to determine different vulnerability profiles for the same events, such as heat waves. That means that for the same hazard, these different parameters lead to different levels of exposure, sensitivity, adaptive capacity, depending on the individuals. We can take here a quick example with an individual from the population we surveyed in Lyon, a woman. We can synthesize the result of the interview transcribed by completing her factors of vulnerability and resilience by surrounding or filling each of the items. And the analysis make it possible to establish her synthetic profile and to characterize in a detailed way her vulnerability. So we have just seen how the model works to understand and analyze vulnerabilities at a particular moment. If we now consider a longer time, we observe that the profile of the same individual and his vulnerability factors are going to evolve and quite a lot during all his life. Okay? So this dynamic dimension has been integrated into our model to take into account variations over time during the life of an individual. And you see that on this schematic representation, we will be able to make a sliding of the profile on the temporal axis to establish comparison at several years interval to trace the evolution of vulnerability and resilience during the main stage of one individual life. We have just seen how the analysis model works at the individual level. Thank you. Oh, I have been very quick. I'm in advance. Oh. We have just seen how the analysis model works at the individual level for inhabitants, but the model also permits changes of scales and moving to more collective ones. Okay, social groups or entire population of a territory, for example, of a neighborhood or a city. Indeed, the aggregation of individual data and the use of statistical processing allow to establish profiles of entire population. For example, we have just completed a major survey on the population vulnerability in the city of Nantes during the heat waves of last summer. And the report has just been published in open source. This analysis will feed the territorial perspective of urban policies. In conclusion, I would say that the research I would say that the research we carry out for the past 7 years have led to this analysis model to synthesize the factors of vulnerability and resilience, impact on health, adaptive strategy and refuge spaces of urban population, as we saw together. So, in the light of these results, rather than speaking of social vulnerability in the singular, it seems more exact to speak of inhabitants' vulnerabilities in the plural in order to highlight their diversity, their inequalities, but also their dynamic and evolving character over time. And as an opening concerning the uses of this model, we have summarized here proposal for 3 types of actors. On the side of the social sciences, it can serve as a basis for structuring next research in other cities and open comparison between different populations from a common canvas. On the side of researchers in the natural sciences or engineering, the model can help the coupling with thermophysiology approaches, and we start to work on that for the previous months. And also allow analysis crossing between physical vulnerability and inhabitants' vulnerabilities. And finally, regarding public and private policies, it makes it possible, this model, to better identify the inequalities of vulnerabilities within the same population and the inhabitants it's difficult to say it with the jet lag problem. The inhabitants differentiated needs and can help to build more tailor-made solutions adapted to different profiles in order to reduce climate injustices and therefore improve the response strategies of our societies to climate issues. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, and we have time for some questions. If anyone has any, there's one here.
Yeah, I try to.
Very impactful research. So I'm wondering I'm not sure if I didn't see it, or what's the variable that you use in assessing the people resilience?
The variable that you use to assess
the people resilience?
The resilience?
Yeah.
What variable? What variable?
In fact, we use a lot of, as we have an empirical entry, we try to see what was the vulnerability indicators that we find on survey, and we integrate them, and it's a balance between vulnerability and resilience. For example, we have a part of the model, I can go back. Here, you have the adaptation strategy that the inhabitants develop. That's a part of the resilience perspective. And here you also have the refuge spaces. And also, if you have a look at all the indicators of vulnerability, if you have the indicator of vulnerability, on the other part, you have the one that you can transform to have the resilience one. So you can have a look at the poster if you want to have more information, because it was very difficult for me to sum up everything. But maybe we can continue after. Yeah.
So question.
There was one here.
Yeah.
Someone first.
I think you go first, and then we go.
You go first. Maybe I didn't understand correctly, but where do the interviews feed the model? Because you mentioned several times the survey and came back to the survey, but where does the qualitative approach enter?
Yeah, we have the quantitative and the qualitative approach. All those data were considered and enter to build the model. So here, for example, I'll take the example of one fight survey, but we've done this for all the survey we have led.
So the vulnerability profile is given by a survey that was built within the narratives.
We had an empirical entry, so we go to see how people deal with climate issues in their everyday lives with different techniques, not only interviews but also questionnaires and observation. For example, I have a PhD students that have lived in a family during heat waves and unable to observe how they deal with it. And we combine all those methods and we analyze with, we create databases to analyze all the factors we find, okay? And we combine it and we build after the model. I don't know if it's clear, or maybe we can continue to discuss it.
I think it's clear now.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We've done it. This representation is for all the different surveys.
Okay, we have one final question for this session.
Yeah, thank you for this talk. You mentioned that this has been published in open access report, or is it about to be?
No, we have published one of the survey results,
Okay.
but we haven't published yet the model analysis. And I think we are going to publish part, of it, because there are a lot of data and results. So we're going maybe to publish this in different articles.
Okay, maybe after this we can get what that first report is that's been published, so we can take a little more detail on that.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we made it to the end of the session and kind of on time, given that we lost one speaker and the order was a little bit changed. But can I just thank you for all coming and thank the speakers one more time, and we'll see you later.